Hey guys, tonight we are diving into the surprisingly complex mind of a meerkat who takes their sentry duty just a little too seriously. Picture this: a small, fuzzy guardian standing bolt upright in the Kalahari desert, scanning the horizon with the intensity of an air traffic controller during a thunderstorm. They're convinced that every speck of dust could be a martial eagle in disguise, and honestly, you probably couldn't handle their level of overthinking about aerial threats. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to hear in the comments what your cat might overthink about when they're staring at that empty corner of your room. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey through one anxious creature's mind. The first rays of sunlight are just touching the red sand, and here you are, already vertical, already scanning. Your little heart is doing that thing where it beats just a touch faster than necessary because morning shift is the important one. Everyone knows that. Predators are hungry after a long night, and your 32 family members below are still drowsy, vulnerable, trusting you to keep them safe. No pressure, though. You stretch up to your full 12 inches, which seemed more impressive when you were a pup. That shadow over there by the acacia tree, is it moving? You squint, tilting your head in that way that helps you judge distance better. Zoologists have discovered that meerkats have horizontal pupils that give them excellent distance vision and a wide field of view, perfect for spotting danger. Which is great, except it also means you can see every single potentially threatening movement within a 360-degree radius. Every single one. The shadow shifts slightly. Your muscles tense. This could be it. This could be the moment you save everyone. Or this could be another embarrassing false alarm, like yesterday when you sent everyone scurrying underground because a butterfly cast a suspicious shadow. But better safe than eaten, right? You emit a soft chirrup, not quite an alarm call, but more of a, "Hey, I'm up here being vigilant" announcement. Below, you hear your sister Carla stirring in the burrow. She probably thinks you're showing off, being the first one up again. But someone has to be first. Someone has to take that pre-dawn shift when the world is all silhouettes and possibilities. And if that someone happens to be you 4 days out of 5, well, that's just coincidence. It's definitely not. Because you lie awake at 3 in the morning, wondering if today will be the day a jackal finds the back entrance to burrow number 3. The shadow moves again. Definitely moving. Your tail goes rigid. Your signature move that says, "I'm taking this seriously." The thing about being a meerkat sentinel is that you're essentially a furry periscope with anxiety. You've got this specialized membrane in your eyes that protects them while you stare directly into the sun. Because apparently evolution decided that wasn't stressful enough, you also needed to be able to look exactly where aerial predators would be backlit and hardest to identify. A small part of your brain, the part that went to those family meetings about proportional responses, suggests that maybe you should wait another second before sounding the alarm. But what if that second is the difference between Uncle Tao making it to safety and becoming a statistic? You've seen the nature documentaries. Well, you've lived the nature documentaries. You know how this goes. The shadow detaches from the tree and you're already opening your mouth to sound the highest level alarm when it's a leaf. A large, dried leaf caught in the morning breeze, performing an incredibly convincing impression of a swooping bird of prey. You swallow the alarm call, which turns into an awkward cough that echoes across the silent desert. "Everything all right up there?" comes your mother's voice from below. She's using that tone, the one that suggests she's asking, but also implying that maybe you could dial it back just a smidge. "All clear," you respond, trying to inject casual confidence into your voice while your heart rate returns to something approaching normal. Just checking the acoustics. The sun climbs a little higher, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. You settle into your watching rhythm, that state of relaxed alertness that the older meerkats make look so easy. Except you can't quite achieve relaxed. Your version is more caffeinated vigilance with occasional moments of controlled panic. The memory of yesterday's butterfly incident starts creeping in like a persistent itch behind your ear. You try to focus on the horizon, but your mind keeps replaying that moment when 27 meerkats burst from the burrows, sand flying, babies crying, everyone assuming battle positions, only to watch a monarch butterfly drift lazily past. The silence afterwards was deafening. Even the cicadas seemed to pause their chirping to judge you. You shift your weight from foot to foot, a nervous habit you've developed during long watches. The thing is, that butterfly's shadow really did look like a martial eagle at first glance. The wingspan was right, the movement pattern was convincingly predatory, and the lighting was doing that tricky morning thing where everything looks 50% more dangerous than it actually is. But try explaining that to cousin Jabari, who'd been in the middle of a particularly good grub and came up with beetle juice still dripping from his whiskers, looking very unimpressed. A legitimate vulture circles in the distance, far enough away to be no immediate threat, but close enough to keep an eye on. You track its lazy spirals and wonder if other sentries spend this much time second-guessing themselves. Do they have a mental checklist that runs constantly? Size of shadow? Check. Speed of approach? Check. Probability of being another embarrassing false alarm? Unfortunately high. Your Aunt Nia takes over the burrow entrance duty below, and you can hear her humming that little tune she does when she's in a good mood. She was one of the few who didn't make you feel bad about yesterday. "Better jumpy than lunch," she'd said, patting your back with her tiny paw. But you caught her exchanging a look with your mother later. One of those wordless conversations that somehow said, perhaps young Kito needs to switch to decaf termites. Scientists have found that meerkat alarm calls are incredibly sophisticated, with different sounds for different threats. There's a specific call for eagles, another for jackals, one for snakes, and even variations based on the urgency level. It's basically a whole language of panic and you speak it fluently, maybe too fluently. You've been known to add unnecessary adjectives to your calls, like that time you specified medium-sized, probably hungry, definitely moving this way snake, when a simple snake alarm would have sufficed. The vulture disappears behind a distant ridge and you relax fractionally. Your replacement should be coming up soon, probably your brother Duma, who treats sentry duty like a meditation session. He'll stand there all zen-like, occasionally issuing calm, measured alerts that somehow always turn out to be accurate. Meanwhile, you're up here playing threat or tumbleweed with every moving object in a 5-kilometer radius. You notice your shadow has shifted with the climbing sun. Time is passing, which means you've successfully not caused any stampedes for a solid 30 minutes. That's progress. Maybe you're getting better at this. Maybe yesterday was just a fluke, a statistical outlier in your otherwise improving track record. Then again, statistics are tricky when you're dealing with life and death. You think about the meerkat motivational speaker who visited last month, the one missing half his tail. The only mistake that matters is the last one, he'd said, which seemed profound at the time, but now feels like a lot of pressure. Every watch could be your last watch if you miss something important. No pressure, though. Just the lives of 36 relatives, depending on your ability to distinguish between death from above and large moth. A ground squirrel pops up about 50 meters away, does its own scanning routine, and disappears again. Even the squirrels look more confident than you feel. They don't seem to suffer from post-alarm clarity, that horrible moment when you realize you've just mobilized an entire community for nothing. They probably don't lie awake at night creating elaborate scenarios where they could have just waited 2 more seconds to positively identify the threat. Your stomach growls, reminding you that you skipped the morning forage to take the early shift. Again. Your therapist, if meerkats had therapists, would probably say something about how you're using excessive vigilance as a way to feel in control. That by taking the most shifts, you're trying to manage your anxiety about protection through sheer volume of watching. But that's ridiculous. You just happen to be naturally alert at dawn, and mid-morning, and late afternoon. And sometimes you do a quick midnight check just to make sure everyone remembered to post a night guard. The desert heat is beginning to build, creating those wavy distortions that make distant objects shimmer and shift. Great. As if identifying aerial predators wasn't hard enough without the landscape doing its funhouse mirror impression. You squint at what might be a large bird, or might be heat shimmer having an identity crisis. Speaking of other guards, here comes Thabo now, emerging from Burrow 2 with that infuriatingly perfect posture he's famous for. He'll probably offer to take over soon, doing that humble thing where he pretends he's not the best sentry in the whole mob. You watch him pause at the burrow entrance, carefully grooming his whiskers into perfect alertness indicators. Of course, he grooms first. Thabo probably has a pre-sentry checklist that he follows religiously, unlike your approach of scramble to the highest point and hope for the best. He moves to the backup lookout post, the slightly lower termite mound about 10 meters away, and performs what can only be described as a textbook surveillance setup. Slow 360-degree scan, test chirp for acoustic clarity, settle into that perfect balance where he somehow looks relaxed and ready simultaneously. You've tried to copy his technique, but you always end up looking like you're doing an anxious yoga pose. "Morning, Kito," he calls over, his voice carrying that easy confidence of someone who's never mistaken a tumbleweed for a honey badger. "Anything interesting?" "Just the usual," you reply, trying to match his casual tone, while internally cataloging the 17 suspicious movements you've tracked in the last hour, all of which turned out to be wind-related phenomena. That vulture from Sector 3 made a pass, but stayed high. Thabo nods approvingly, and you feel simultaneously validated and inferior. He has this way of making "stayed high" sound like critical intelligence rather than stating the obvious. When Thabo gives a sit rep, it sounds like poetry. When you do it, it sounds like you're reading a grocery list written by someone with anxiety disorder. The really frustrating thing about Thabo is that he never seems to false alarm, but he also never misses anything real. Last week, he spotted that cobra a full 30 seconds before it would have been a problem, issued one calm, clear alert, and everyone responded perfectly. Meanwhile, you once caused a full evacuation because a stick fell off a tree in a snake-like manner. You've been keeping mental statistics, which is probably not healthy but feels necessary. Thabo's accuracy rate hovers around 95%. Your own stats are harder to calculate because do you count the times when you almost called an alarm but didn't? What about the occasions when you made a sort of half-hearted warning chirp that could be interpreted as either possible danger or "I'm clearing my throat"? Researchers have documented that meerkat sentries actually have different personality types, from bold to shy, and these traits affect how they perform guard duty. Apparently, there's value in having both types in a mob. The bold ones might take more risks, but also spot threats earlier, while the cautious ones might false alarm more, but ensure nothing gets missed. This should make you feel better about your hair trigger response system, but mostly it just makes you wonder if you're the mob's token neurotic. "Want me to take over?" Thabo offers after you've been lost in thought for who knows how long. See, this is the other thing about him. He's not just competent, he's also nice about it. He could easily point out that your relief shift technically started 7 minutes ago, but instead, he phrases it like he's asking for a favor. "I've got a few more minutes in me," you hear yourself saying, because apparently your competitive streak overrides your complaining stomach. You can't let Thabo think you're eager to abandon your post. Even though your legs are getting that tingly feeling from standing in one position too long, and the sun is now at that angle where even your special eye membrane is struggling. He settles into his watching pose, and now you're both on duty, which isn't necessary, but happens sometimes when the weather's nice and no one's in a hurry to dig tunnels. You try not to compare your scanning technique to his, but it's impossible not to notice how he moves his head in smooth, measured arcs while you tend to dart from point to point like you're following an invisible tennis match. A real hawk appears on the horizon, and you both spot it at the same time. This is it, your chance to show you can match Thabo's legendary calm under pressure. You begin to inhale for the alarm call, but Thabo just watches, tracks, and waits. The hawk is definitely a hawk, definitely circling, but Thabo remains silent. You hold your breath, alarm call trapped in your throat, like a sneeze you're trying not to release. The hawk circles twice more, then angles away, clearly hunting somewhere else today. Thabo makes a small sound, like he's filing this information away in some mental database of hawk behavior patterns. You, meanwhile, are lightheaded from holding your breath and trying to look like you also knew the hawk wasn't an immediate threat. "Good eye," Thabo says, and you realize he noticed you tracking it too. That's the female from the Northern Territory. She usually hunts the dry riverbed this time of day. Of course, Thabo has individual hawks memorized. He probably knows their names, their favorite hunting grounds, and their dietary preferences. You can barely remember which burrow entrance leads to the nursery versus the pantry. The conversation with Thabo fades as he settles into his own watching rhythm, and you're left alone with your thoughts again. Well, alone, except for the approximately 47 things currently casting shadows across the desert floor. Each one requires individual assessment, classification, and a decision about threat level. That tumbleweed rolling past could be a honey badger in disguise. You've never actually seen a honey badger disguise itself as a tumbleweed, but that doesn't mean it couldn't happen. You focus on a particularly suspicious shadow near the acacia grove. It's doing that thing where it almost looks like it's moving independently of whatever's casting it. Your brain starts its familiar routine. Analyze shape, check wind patterns, calculate distance, factor in sun angle, consider possibility of shadow puppetry by creative predators. The shadow stretches and contracts with passing clouds, and you find yourself creating an entire backstory for it. Maybe it's a new species of ground-dwelling hawk that's evolved specifically to mess with meerkat sentries. A butterfly floats past, and your muscles do an involuntary twitch. Different butterfly than yesterday, you note with the kind of detail reserved for trauma memories. This one's orange and black, smaller wingspan, less eagle-like in its shadow casting. You've been mentally cataloging butterfly shadows like some kind of demented lepidopterist. Small white butterfly equals virtually no threat confusion. Large monarch equals potential panic. That new blue one from last week equals 15 minutes of careful observation to confirm it wasn't some kind of aerial reconnaissance. The cloud situation is getting complicated too. Morning clouds were sparse and high, creating clear, defined shadows that were easy to track. But now, they're building into these puffy afternoon formations that create moving shadow patterns across the entire landscape. It's like trying to play whack-a-mole when every hole might contain either nothing or death. Your neck is starting to ache from the constant swiveling. Scientists have confirmed that meerkats can see ultraviolet light, which helps them spot predators against bright skies. This fun fact would be more fun if it didn't mean you could see even more potentially threatening shapes than necessary. It's like having high-definition paranoia. You can see the UV patterns on that bird's wings from here, which is helpful for identification, but also means you're processing about 3 times as much visual information as you probably need to. That rock outcropping to the west keeps producing new shadows as the sun moves. Each one could theoretically hide something dangerous. You've memorized the sequence now. Thin shadow at sunrise, gradually widening until it splits into 2 around midday, then merging again for the afternoon show. But today, there's an extra shadow, or maybe the usual shadow is just slightly off angle, or maybe you're losing your mind from staring at rocks all day. Your cousin Zara pops up from the burrow, sees both you and Thabo on duty, and makes that little snorting sound that means overachievers. She's the type who does exactly her assigned shift and not a minute more. Must be nice to have that kind of confidence in the schedule, to trust that everything will be fine if you just follow the rotation. You've tried explaining that predators don't follow schedules, but she just laughs and says, you need to learn to delegate worry. A leaf detaches from the acacia and begins its descent. Your eyes lock onto it immediately, tracking its every spin and flutter. It's performing an interpretive dance called Am I a Leaf or a Small Raptor? And you're the only audience member who can't quite decide. The logical part of your brain knows it's a leaf. You watched it detach from the branch. But the paranoid sentry part of your brain whispers, what if raptors have learned to mimic falling leaves? The leaf lands. It was just a leaf. Thabo didn't even glance at it. You're developing a complex about shadows now. Each one requires a full psychological profile. That shadow there could be a cloud, but clouds at this altitude moving at that speed with this wind pattern usually cast shadows approximately 4% larger. So maybe it's not a cloud, maybe it's something circling high enough to look like a cloud, but low enough to cast a slightly smaller shadow. This is the kind of math that would make your old burrow school teacher proud and your therapist concerned. A ground squirrel's alarm call echoes from the distance, and every meerkat in the vicinity freezes. You and Thabo exchange glances, both tracking the direction of the call. The squirrels have a different perspective, literally. They might see something you've missed, or they might be having their own false alarm issues. It's hard to know if you're part of an interconnected early warning system or just a bunch of anxious mammals enabling each other's paranoia. The squirrel alarm peters out into embarrassed chittering. Apparently, even other species have their moments of shadow confusion. This should be comforting, but instead you're wondering if maybe the whole desert is just populated by creatures second-guessing every visual stimulus. Maybe that's just life in the food chain, middle management, too big to hide under pebbles, too small to not care about aerial threats. Your shadow assessment spreadsheet, if you were keeping one, would be getting complicated. Time of day affects shadow sharpness. Weather changes shadow patterns. Seasonal variations in sun angle create entirely different shadow landscapes. You're basically trying to earn a doctorate in shadowology while standing on one leg and keeping 32 relatives alive. The sun has definitely shifted into afternoon territory, which means you've been up here for... Actually, you've lost track. Time moves differently when you're in hypervigilance mode. Minutes feel like hours when you're tracking suspicious shadows. But apparently hours have passed like minutes because your stomach is now composing protest songs. This brings up the eternal question: when is the right time to hand over duty? You glance at Thabo, who shows no signs of wanting to take full control of sentry duty. He could be waiting for you to make the first move, or he could be perfectly content to stand there all day like some kind of Zen statue with fur. The politics of guard rotation are more complex than outsiders might think. Leave too early, and you're the slacker who can't handle a proper shift. Stay too long, and you're the control freak who doesn't trust anyone else. Your little sister Asha scrambles up to your mound, all bright-eyed and eager. Can I try? Can I? I've been practicing my alarm calls. She demonstrates with a series of chirps that sound more like she's auditioning for a Meerkat musical than warning about predators. At 8 weeks old, she's technically old enough to start learning sentry basics, but the thought of leaving her in charge makes your eye twitch. Maybe you could shadow me for a bit first, you suggest, which is code for, absolutely not, but I don't want to crush your dreams. She bounces excitedly, interpreting this as permission to stay, and now you have an apprentice you didn't ask for. During a shift you're not sure how to end. The thing about sentry duty rotation is that there's no official timekeeper. It's all based on some mysterious internal clock that experienced meerkats seem to have calibrated perfectly. Your internal clock appears to be set to permanent anxiety, with occasional dips into exhausted but unwilling to admit it. You've tried counting to 1,000 breaths as a measure, but your breathing speeds up when you spot potential threats, so that system falls apart quickly. Zoologists studying meerkat behavior have noted that sentries typically stand guard for about an hour at a time, but this varies based on conditions, individual personality, and social dynamics. An hour. That sounds so reasonable when you read it in a nature guide. In practice, it feels like trying to decide when to leave a party where you're not sure if you're the entertainment or just annoying everyone. Is that a hawk? Asha squeaks, pointing at what is very clearly a dove. A dove so obviously dove like that. Even from here, you can see its distinctive round body and gentle flight pattern. This is exactly why 8-week-olds shouldn't be on solo sentry duty. But try explaining that to someone who thinks every flying object is equally exciting and terrifying. That's a dove, you explain patiently. See how it flies in a straight line with quick wing beats? Hawks soar more, circle, use thermals. You're automatically slipping into teacher mode. which at least gives you something to do besides wonder if you've been up here long enough to justify a break. Asha nods seriously, filing this information away, probably right next to her belief that scorpions can fly if they try hard enough. Your mother's voice drifts up from below. Kito, honey, didn't you take the dawn shift too? There's that tone again, the one that suggests without demanding. She's right, of course. You did take the dawn shift, and the late evening shift yesterday, and that unofficial midnight check that you insist doesn't count because you weren't officially on duty, just happened to be awake and figured you might as well have a look around. Just finishing up, you call back, which is what you said 20 minutes ago when Uncle Tao asked the same question. Finishing up has become your default response, a phrase that could mean anything from "give me 5 more minutes" to "I'll come down when my legs physically give out." Thabo stretches, a subtle movement that somehow communicates he's ready to take solo duty whenever you're ready to yield. He's so good at nonverbal communication. When you stretch, it looks like you're having muscle spasms. When he does it, it's like watching a professional athlete warm up. Even his yawns look purposeful rather than exhausted. The real problem with rotation timing is the transition period. Those vulnerable minutes when one sentry is climbing down and another is settling in. What if that's exactly when a martial eagle decides to strike? You've seen the statistics, or at least you've created statistics in your head based on worry rather than data. Transition periods feel like invitation cards to predators. Asha starts practicing her alarm calls again, this time trying to differentiate between snake and big snake. They sound identical, but she seems proud of the nuanced difference only she can hear. You remember being that age, thinking sentry duty was all glamour and heroism. No one mentions the leg cramps, the existential dread, or the complex social calculations required to execute a simple shift change. "I can take it from here," Thabo says finally, and something in his tone makes it less of an offer and more of a gentle intervention. Maybe your swaying is more noticeable than you thought. Or maybe the fact that you've been unconsciously narrating shadow movements out loud for the past 10 minutes gave you away. The descent from your lookout post feels like admitting something you're not quite ready to face. Each carefully placed paw on the way down brings you closer to the underground world you've been successfully avoiding all morning. Not that you're avoiding it, you're just really dedicated to aerial threat assessment. The fact that tunnel maintenance was scheduled for today is pure coincidence. Your paws hit the sandy ground, and immediately you can hear the industrious scratching and digging from below. The mob has been working on extending Tunnel System 3, the one that collapsed during last month's unexpected rainfall. Everyone's down there doing their part, moving sand, reinforcing walls, creating new chambers. And here you are, suddenly very interested in doing a perimeter check. Just to be thorough, finally decided to join us underground? Your brother Kusi emerges from the burrow entrance, covered in so much dirt, he looks like a walking dust ball with eyes. There's judgment in those eyes, or maybe that's just sand. Hard to tell. He shakes himself off, creating a small sandstorm that makes you step back and coincidentally closer to the lookout post you just left. The thing about meerkat society is that everyone's supposed to contribute equally to all aspects of mob life. Foraging, babysitting, tunnel maintenance, sentry duty. It's all meant to be shared. But somehow, you've developed a reputation as the above-ground specialist, which sounds better than the one who gets claustrophobic in the tunnels, though both descriptions are technically accurate. You follow Kusi toward the burrow entrance, each step feeling heavier than the last. The darkness of the tunnel mouth yawns before you like a perfectly normal burrow entrance that definitely doesn't remind you of being trapped in Tunnel 7 during your adolescent growth spurts. That was 2 years ago. You're totally over it. The fact that you still map out 3 separate exit routes before entering any tunnel is just good safety planning. Scientists have documented that meerkat burrow systems can be incredibly complex, with tunnels reaching 3 meters deep and covering areas up to 300 square meters. That's a lot of underground real estate to maintain, and someone needs to do it. That someone is apparently everyone except the meerkat, who coincidentally always has urgent topside business whenever digging duty comes around. We're working on the nursery expansion, Kusi explains as you reluctantly follow him down. The tunnel immediately feels smaller than it probably is. Could really use your help with the ceiling supports. Remember how good you were at that when we were pups? You do remember. Back when tunnels felt like adventure playgrounds instead of earth and anxiety chambers. When the biggest worry was getting your digging technique right, not calculating the statistical probability of cave-ins based on soil, moisture content, and recent rainfall patterns. Those were simpler times. The sounds of digging grow louder as you descend. Around you, the tunnel walls press in with all their earthen intensity. Meerkats are built for this, you remind yourself. You have special ears that can close to keep sand out, curved claws perfect for digging, and a streamlined body designed for navigating tight spaces. Your body knows what to do down here. It's just your brain that's having issues. Kito, perfect timing. Aunt Nia's voice echoes from somewhere deeper in the system. We need someone your size for the connector tunnel between chambers 4 and 5. Of course they do. Connector tunnels are the worst. Too small for comfortable movement, too important to dig hastily. They require a special combination of precision and contortion that you used to excel at before you discovered you prefer horizons to Earth's ceilings. You make your way toward the work site, noting every tunnel junction, every exit route, every place where the walls seem a little too close or the ceiling a little too low. Other meerkats squeeze past you, carrying mouthfuls of excavated sand, completely comfortable in this underground world. They chat as they work, discussing optimal tunnel angles and soil consistency like it's the most natural thing in the world. The truth you've been avoiding is that you might actually be good at tunnel work if you could get past the whole tons of earth above your head thing. Your attention to detail that makes you hypervigilant about shadows would translate well to spotting structural weaknesses. Your anxiety about everything could be channeled into creating the safest, most reinforced tunnels in the Kalahari. But that would require being underground for extended periods, and your lungs are already doing that thing where they forget how to work properly. You coming, or are you going to stand there all day? Your cousin Zara squeezes past with a particularly large mouthful of sand. Even she's down here, and she's usually the first to complain about getting dirty. The peer pressure is real and sandy. You take a breath of the earthy air, trying not to think about how many tons of sand are between you and the sky. Down here, there are no shadows to analyze, no horizons to scan, just walls and darkness, and the constant possibility that the whole thing could come down. Which it won't. Probably. The engineering is sound. You've seen the blueprints, or at least the scratches in the sand that pass for blueprints. Section 7. The connector tunnel work is exactly as cramped as you remembered, but you managed to help for a solid 20 minutes before the walls start feeling particularly wall-like and you need to surface for a quick ventilation check. Nobody comments when you emerge gasping like you've been underwater, but you catch a few knowing looks. This is the other thing about being the anxious one in the mob. Everyone notices your patterns, your quirks, your sudden need for sky. Back above ground, you find Thabo still at his post, now joined by your cousin, Lena, who's practicing her alarm calls. Unlike your sister's musical interpretations, Lena's attempts are technically correct, but somehow lack conviction. She's got the pitch right, the urgency level appropriate, but there's something missing. It's like listening to someone read a safety manual versus someone who actually believes the building is on fire. This brings you to your newest source of worry, vocal authority. Your alarm calls are accurate, you know they are. You've practiced them extensively, maybe obsessively, definitely more than necessary. But lately, you've been wondering if they carry the right weight. Do you sound like a meerkat who knows what they're talking about? Or like someone who's perpetually unsure about everything, including their own warnings? You settle near the backup lookout post, ostensibly doing a ground-level patrol, but really eavesdropping on Lena's practice session. Try it with more diaphragm, Thabo suggests gently. The call needs to carry to the furthest burrow. Lena tries again, and it's better, but still sounds like she's politely suggesting there might be danger rather than commanding immediate action. The social hierarchy of alarm calls is more complex than most animals realize. There's a whole unspoken system about whose warnings get taken most seriously. Age plays a part, experience matters, but there's also this intangible quality of believability. Some meerkats just sound more authoritative. When the matriarch calls an alarm, everyone moves without question. When you do it, there's sometimes a half-second pause while everyone evaluates your track record. Research has shown that meerkats actually adjust their response based on who's calling the alarm. They're more likely to react strongly to calls from reliable sentries and may even ignore warnings from individuals who false alarm frequently. This is simultaneously fascinating and personally devastating. It means every butterfly incident, every leaf-based false alarm, is basically stored in the mob's collective memory as a reliability score. Kito, want to help Lena with her eagle call? Thabo suggests, probably because you're hovering in that obvious way that says you want to be included, but don't know how to invite yourself. You appreciate the gesture, even as you wonder if your alarm calls are really the best example for an impressionable youngster. You demonstrate the high-pitched, urgent bark that signals aerial predator, putting all your practice into it. It sounds good to your ears, carries well, has the right level of panic without tipping into hysteria. But then you notice Lena's expression, that slight tilt of her head that says she's analyzing something. Why does yours sound so worried, she asks, with the blunt honesty of youth. Thabo sounds confident. Yours sounds like you're asking a question, out of the mouths of pups. You realize she's identified exactly what you've been afraid of. Your alarm calls do carry a note of uncertainty, a slight uptick at the end that turns statements into questions. Definitely an eagle instead of eagle. Run. It's like your self-doubt has infected your vocal cords. Everyone has their own style, Thabo intervenes diplomatically. What matters is clear communication. But you catch him demonstrating his eagle call next. And yes, it does sound like it was carved from granite and authority. When Thabo announces danger, it sounds like a fact. When you do it, it sounds like a hypothesis that needs peer review. The afternoon foraging party starts emerging from various burrows, preparing for the daily hunt for scorpions and beetles. Your mother pauses by your group, listening to the alarm call practice with that expression she gets when she's trying not to give unsolicited advice. Finally, she can't help herself. Kito, sweetness, remember when you were younger? Your alarm calls used to wake up meerkats in the next territory. What happened to that confidence? She means well, but pointing out that you used to be less anxious about your anxiety is not exactly helpful. That was before you understood the weight of responsibility, before you realized how many ways a warning could go wrong. Maybe we should practice scenarios, Lena suggests, eager to learn. Thabo can pretend to spot something, and we react. This is a reasonable training exercise that immediately spirals in your mind into performance anxiety. What if you react too slowly, too quickly? What if your practice alarm doesn't sound alarmed enough? The mob starts organizing their foraging groups, and you notice the subtle ways they position themselves. The most trusted sentries get nodded at, acknowledged, their presence noted as a safety factor. You get affectionate pats and suggestions to not overdo it today. It's loving concern mixed with a gentle lack of faith in your judgment that stings more than outright dismissal would. The sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in those golden hour hues that photographers love and sentries dread. This is the trickiest time for threat assessment. The light plays games with your eyes, creating long shadows that stretch and distort familiar landmarks into potential dangers. Even that termite mound you've known your whole life looks vaguely menacing when it throws a shadow that reaches halfway to burrow 2. You find yourself back on lookout duty because of course you do. The evening shift wasn't technically yours, but when you saw young Diki preparing to take it, looking all of 9 weeks old and about as ready for solo sentry duty as a grub is for flying, you volunteered. That's what you told yourself anyway. The truth might have more to do with avoiding the dinner crowd underground, where everyone would be sharing their day's accomplishments, while you'd have to explain why your tunnel contribution lasted exactly 23 minutes. The philosophical questions always hit during evening watch. Maybe it's the changing light, or the way the desert transforms from harsh reality to painted dreamscape. But this is when your thoughts turn from practical worries to existential ones. What exactly constitutes a threat? If you spend your entire life watching for danger, at what point does the watching itself become the thing that harms you? A legitimate hawk circles in the distance, far enough away to be purely observational. You track it because that's what you do, but your mind wanders to bigger questions. This hawk has its own life, its own concerns. It's not spending its evening obsessing over whether meerkats think it's a good hunter. It just hunts. The simplicity of being a predator must be nice. You're either hunting or not, success or failure. No middle ground of maybe threats and social dynamics to navigate. The foraging party returns in small groups, bellies full, chattering about the day's finds. Your sister Asha bounds up to show you a particularly impressive beetle she saved just for you. "Since you missed dinner again," she says, dropping it at your feet with pure sibling affection. The beetle is half squished, but offered with such love that you eat it anyway, pretending it's the best thing you've tasted all day. "Why do we stand guard?" Asha asks suddenly, settling beside you in a miniature version of your stance. It's such a simple question that you're temporarily stunned. Why do you stand guard? The obvious answer is to protect the mob from predators. But lately, you've been wondering if it's more complicated than that. Maybe you stand guard because you need to feel useful. Maybe because stillness without purpose feels worse than exhaustion with meaning. To keep everyone safe, you answer, going with the simple truth. But Asha, in that way children have, of cutting through to the heart of things, follows up immediately. But what if nothing comes? What if we spend all day watching for things that never happen? Zoologists have observed that meerkat sentries actually have one of the most important jobs in the mob, with their vigilance directly correlating to group survival rates. But knowing your job matters statistically and feeling it matters moment to moment are different things. How do you measure prevented attacks? How do you quantify dangers that didn't materialize because you were watching? Then we've had a good day, you tell Asha, but the words feel hollow even as you say them. Is a good day just the absence of bad things? Is success simply nothing going wrong? The hawk has disappeared now, and you're left staring at an empty sky, wondering if you're protecting your family or just projecting your fears onto every cloud formation. Your Uncle Tao climbs up to join you, moving with the careful precision of age. He's been standing sentry for 15 years, which in meerkat terms makes him practically ancient. Deep thoughts? He asks, noting your expression. Uncle Tao has this way of knowing when you're spiraling into philosophy. Asha asked why we stand guard. You explain, and he nods thoughtfully. I used to wonder that myself, he admits, especially on days when nothing happened. Felt like I was wasting time, watching empty skies. He pauses, scanning the horizon with practiced ease. Then I realized something. The watching itself changes things. We're not just looking for danger. We're holding space for safety. It's the kind of mystical nonsense that should annoy you, but somehow it lands differently coming from someone with half a tail and a lifetime of successful watches. Maybe there's something to the idea that vigilance creates its own reality. Maybe your anxious scanning does more than just spot threats. Maybe it creates a bubble of awareness that danger actively avoids. The sunset accelerates, as it always does, those last few minutes of light disappearing faster than seems fair. Soon, the night sentries will take over, with their different skills and different fears. You've never been a night guard. The darkness holds its own special terrors that make shadow analysis look like child's play. At least shadows require light. Night threats could come from anywhere. Want to practice alarm calls? Asha asks, bringing you back from your philosophical wanderings. But there's something different about practicing as the day ends. The sounds carry differently, mean differently. An alarm call at sunset isn't just about immediate danger. It's about the transition between known and unknown, day and night, one kind of vigilance and another. As full darkness approaches and the night shift officially begins, you finally climb down from your post. Your legs wobble slightly, a combination of exhaustion and the strange sensation of returning to ground level after hours of vertical vigilance. The mob is settling into their evening routines, and you catch the tail end of a conversation between two aunts about your sentry schedule. That one would watch the stars all night if we let him, one says. Not unkindly, but with that tone of fond exasperation you've heard all your life. You find a quiet spot near Burrow 3, not quite ready to go underground, but no longer needing to be the highest point in the landscape. The night sentries are taking their positions now, and you watch them with a mixture of relief and reluctance. Part of you wants to offer tips, suggestions, warnings about which shadows are particularly tricky at night. But you recognize this urge for what it is, the inability to fully hand over responsibility even when your shift is definitively over. Your mother settles beside you, grooming your fur with the practiced motions of someone who's been calming anxious meerkats for years. You know, she says carefully, your grandfather was the same way. Couldn't rest if he wasn't watching something. This is news to you. Grandfather Kume was always portrayed as the mob's steadiest sentry, the one whose calls were never questioned, whose judgment was impeccable. He false alarmed too, you ask, trying not to sound too hopeful about your grandfather's potential failures. Your mother chuckles softly. Oh, honey, he once evacuated 3 burrows because a plastic bag blew by. thought it was some new type of aerial predator. She continues grooming, letting this revelation sink in. But you know what? 2 weeks later, he spotted a real eagle that everyone else missed. Saved 6 pups that day. The comparison should be comforting, but your brain immediately latches on to the mathematics. 1 embarrassing false alarm for 1 heroic save. What's your current ratio? How many butterfly incidents equal 1 genuine threat spotted? You're about to voice this when your mother continues, seemingly reading your mind. It's not about the ratio, Kito. It's about presence. Your grandfather used to say that a watched desert is a safe desert, even if half the things you're watching turn out to be your own imagination. She pauses, picking out a bit of sand from behind your ear. The mob doesn't need perfect sentries. We need dedicated ones. And honey, you might be anxious, but you're nothing if not dedicated. Recent studies have shown that anxious individuals in social species often serve crucial roles in group survival, acting as early warning systems even when their caution seems excessive. The research suggests that having some highly vigilant, even anxious members benefits the entire group. You're basically evolution's way of hedging bets against complacency. This should feel like validation, but knowing you're genetically programmed for worry isn't exactly soothing. Uncle Tao wanders over, settling his creaky joints with a satisfied sigh. "Night watch is covered," he reports, then looks at you meaningfully. "All covered. No assistance needed." In case you were wondering, how does everyone know you so well? Were your plans to do a casual midnight patrol that obvious? "I was just thinking," you start, but Tao cuts you off with a gentle paw to your shoulder. "I know what you were thinking. Same thing I thought every night for my first 5 years of sentry duty. What if the night guards miss something? What if there's a gap in coverage? What if? He shifts his weight, getting comfortable for what's clearly going to be a story. Want to know when I finally relaxed? When I realized that the mob survived for generations before I was born and would survive long after. My job wasn't to be the only watcher. It was to be one watcher among many, doing my part during my time. He gestures toward the night sentries. Trust is harder than vigilance sometimes, but it's just as important. The stars are coming out now, brilliant in the clear desert air. You've memorized their patterns too, just in case predators ever develop space technology. But tonight, for once, they just look like stars. Pretty, distant, decidedly non-threatening stars. A small miracle of perception that you decide to accept rather than analyze. Your sister Asha appears with a handful of other young meerkats, all ready for sleep but wanting a bedtime story. They pile around you expectantly, and somehow you've become the storyteller. Tell us about the day you saved everyone from the shadow monster. One pipes up, and you realize they're talking about last month when you correctly identified a martial eagle despite poor visibility. As you tell the story, embellishing only slightly, you notice how their eyes shine with admiration rather than amusement. To them, you're not the meerkat who false alarms at butterflies. You're the one who stays up watching when others might give up. The one who takes every shadow seriously, because one time out of 50 it matters. Through their eyes, your anxiety looks less like weakness and more like determination. The evening settles into night properly, and one by one, the mob members head underground. You find yourself moving with them, not rushing to your usual perimeter check, not suggesting one more scan of the horizon. Your grandmother passes by and nods approvingly. About time, you learned that rest is part of the job too, she murmurs. As you finally descend into the burrow system for the night, the familiar earthen walls don't seem quite as constraining. Your family is settling into their sleeping chambers, making those soft comfort sounds that mean all is well. You find your usual spot, not too deep, but not right by the entrance either. A compromise between your need for easy exit routes and your body's desperate need for rest. The sounds of the desert night filter down faintly. A distant owl call, the whisper of wind across sand, the tiny movements of nocturnal creatures going about their business. For once, these sounds don't trigger your analysis mode. They're just the soundtrack of a world that continues spinning whether you're watching or not. You curl into your sleeping position, tail wrapped around for warmth, surrounded by the gentle breathing of your mob. 32 lives, all trusting that between all of you, someone is always watching, someone is always ready. Maybe that's the secret you've been missing. It's not about being the perfect sentry. It's about being part of a system where everyone's imperfections overlap into something resembling safety. Your breathing begins to slow, matching the rhythm of your family around you. The hypervigilance that's been your constant companion all day starts to fade at the edges, replaced by something softer. Tomorrow there will be new shadows to analyze, new butterflies to mistake for threats, new moments of uncertainty about whether your alarm calls carry enough authority. But right now, in this moment, you're just one meerkat among many, each doing their best with their own particular mix of courage and caution. The last thought that drifts through your mind before sleep claims you is oddly comforting. Somewhere above, a night sentry is standing watch, probably creating their own catalogue of worries and phantom threats. And that's okay, because tomorrow, when the sun rises and the shadows return, you'll be there to take your turn again. Not perfect, perhaps a bit too anxious, definitely overthinking every flutter of wings. But present, always present. Your family's breathing creates a gentle chorus around you, a sound more soothing than any lullaby. In and out, in and out. The rhythm of lives trusting each other. You let your eyes close fully, your muscles finally releasing their constant state of readiness. For now, for these precious hours of darkness, you can let someone else carry the weight of watching. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all, knowing when to hold tight and when to let go. The desert sleeps, and finally, so do you. Safe in your burrow, surrounded by family, trusting in the ancient dance of watchers and sleepers that has kept meerkats safe for millennia. That's all for today. Sweet dreams.
Sleep, sweet, drift away. Tomorrow brings a brand new day. Dream, dream, to sail so far. You're my precious little star. The world is still, dreams are